Welcome to Sinful's Horror Stories. If you're new to the channel, please be sure to subscribe now for future content. And may I just say, God bless the world. Sit back, try and relax, stay sinful. Story number 1. I grew up in New Mexico and was always very into the outdoors. Hiking, camping, rock climbing, etc. One summer when I was 19, I went on a 4-day and 3-night camping trip near my parents' house, all by myself. This might sound weird, but I had been to this area many times and it was quite safe. Anyway, I brought my camera and took lots of pictures. When I came back and developed my film, there were 3 extra pictures that I didn't take. Of me, sleeping, one from each night. None of my stuff was missing or stolen, and nothing happened, but it freaked me the hell out. Story number 2. When I was barely 20 years old, I was traveling with a small group of people through China, and we were spending about 2 months in Qinghai province, which used to be part of Tibet. Our destination was a specific town to teach English, but we'd be stopping off in towns and small cities along the way. One day we arrived in a rural town, very small, nothing unusual. We spent only a couple of days there, shopping for food at the markets and walking around to see the sights, although there weren't many to see. This was in the dead of winter in February, and all of the grass on the hills and plains around the town was dead and brown. The overall feeling was that of the normal kind of bleakness that any rural place has in the dead of winter. At this time in my life, things were going amazingly, extraordinarily well for me, and I say that because my teenagehood had been rather darkly overcast. But the overwhelming good luck of being able to travel and these close friends I'd made in the last year had more than changed my feelings and attitudes towards life. It was like I was a whole new person. I was ecstatic to be in Tibet, went to sleep with a smile on my face every night. On our second day staying in this small town, I woke up feeling a little odd. Not bad, just odd, like my normal thoughts and feelings had been turned down low, like on a dial. We all decided to go for a walk on the hills right behind the town, where there was a small summit with a pile of rocks and some prayer flags. To be honest, there were little altars like these on every hill, but it gave us something to do. As we hiked up the hills behind the town, I started feeling stranger and stranger. I wasn't scared, and I didn't feel angry or any strong emotion. In fact, it was like emotion was trickling out of me somehow, and I was getting blanker and blanker, emptier and emptier. My mind started feeling a little hazy, and more I felt like I simply didn't care about anything. A small and rapidly dwindling part of myself started to panic, knew that something bad was happening, but it was like my own inner voice was slowly getting quieter. I remember we reached the little summit, and I simply sank to the ground next to the pile of rocks. Without meaning to, I started tuning out the voices around me and fixed all of my attention on the little pebbles in the dirt. I began tapping one against the other repeatedly. Do you know the kind of horror that is opposite of feeling scared or feeling anything at all? The kind of hideousness of a fly buzzing against a closed window for hours on end in an empty room. This is what was filling my mind. It was demonic in its meaninglessness. I touched my face and felt like I was grinning at nothing. Through all the emptiness, the thought floated to the forefront of my mind. You should just die. At first it sounded totally reasonable, but something in me fought it, and I was momentarily troubled. Right then, my group started to walk down from the hill and I followed. The further we walked, the more normal I felt, until we left the town that afternoon, and I was totally freaked out. When another girl, Hannah, mentioned in an odd offhand way that she felt very strange and depressed while staying there. I told her that I'd felt the same. When the group leader mentioned that a local had told him that the town had been plagued with a rash of young women under 25 committing suicide, Hannah and I turned white. Story number 3. So when I was a kid, I would race up to the top of the stairs as fast as I could, like it was some sort of silly game. Well, I must have been 5 or 6 at the time. I'm not sure, but I know I was very little. Somewhere along the way, a voice at the top of the stairs started to whisper to me. It would make bets with me, such as, "I bet you a penny you can't make it to the top of the stairs." I don't really think there was a certain amount of time or anything. As I said, I was very little, so I probably didn't have any counting abilities anyway. I recall just sitting at the top of the stairs having conversations with this voice, about the betting, of course. Eventually the voice, it was like a whisper of a man's voice, not my own voice in my head, started to bet me my life. Instead of pennies, it would say, "I bet you your life you can't make it up the stairs." As I got older, it stopped. I never really thought about it at all. I never mentioned it to anyone. Till one night I was sleeping over at my brother's place. I was about 18, he was 22, and we were talking about spooky stories. Out of nowhere, I brought up the voice at the top of the stairs. My brother got all quiet and weird. Before I even mentioned the betting aspect, he said, "Did it make bets with you?" We both looked at each other horrified. It certainly was freaky after the fact. A lot of bad shit went down in my family at that period of time in my life, and my mother, a heavily religious lady, said there was a lot of evil in our lives at that time. I don't at all think our place was haunted. By the way, it was built in the late 70s, and as I got older, I never experienced anything like that again. Story number 4. When I was little, I used to wake up in the middle of the night and go into my parents' room and sleep next to my mom. One night when I was about 5 or 6, I had this really vivid dream where I woke up scared and went into my mom's room to sleep with her. When I went in, however, there was a set of parents on the bed and a set of identical parents on the floor. I instinctively knew in my dream that I had to wake the right parents, because the wrong parents were evil. So I chose the parents on the floor. I distinctly remember thinking that the evil imposter parents would try and trick me, so I chose the parents on the floor. When I went over to the parents on the floor, they both opened their eyes, and where their eyes should have been was a bright red glowing light. That was when I actually woke up. Being a little kid, I of course went right into my parents' room to sleep next to my mom. There was a set of parents on the bed and a set of parents on the floor. I literally pissed myself. The second set of parents was actually a pile of unfolded laundry, but I will never forget the fear that struck my little 6-year-old heart at that very minute. Story number 5. When I left the reservation for college, I moved to a small town across the state. The town was one of the oldest in Dakota Territory, and I was happy to be living in a place that had roots that went back as far as they did. I loved history, and this felt like a place I could explore and be a part of. I was very wrong. Not long after I moved into the dorms, strange things started happening. I'd hear grunts and furniture moving in the room next to mine, but when I'd ask my RA about the person who lived there, she'd look at me like I was crazy. No one lived in that room. No one had lived in that room for years. It was intentionally kept empty. These noises happened so often I decided to change dorms. The next dorm I lived in was the oldest on campus. Built after a massive flood destroyed most of the town. The dorm was large and always dark, even at noon on the brightest day. Something felt off about the building from the very beginning, but I decided that as finals were approaching, I really didn't need to deal with naked roommate and her creepy boyfriend on top of studying. I was given my own room, and at first I was very excited to have the space all to myself. The excitement was very short-lived. However, as I began to notice things move out of the corner of my eye, little balls of light shifted and bounced over things. Occasionally I dreamed that something big and black was standing over me, but I was determined to ignore the supernatural and creepy now that I was off the res. Still, I had my advisor send another native in to smudge my room. To be honest, smudging only seemed to make things worse. I began seeing more and more shadows and creepy balls of light. I knew that if I looked directly at them, the light balls would turn into fully formed ghosts. I avoided looking at them for as long as I could, and I did my best to ignore the deep, deep dread that I felt every time I was in my room. I'd only been in my new dorm for a week and a half when I decided that I couldn't take the darkness anymore. I'd been ignoring strange things for the past few days, and I thought that the more light might make me feel less afraid. I went to the local Walmart and bought a large strand of Christmas lights and scented candles. When I got home, I took the lights out of their box and looped them in a circle on top of the plastic bag they'd been in. I sat on my bed to do homework. While I was reading, I noticed a huge ball of light move from the window where the sage was and bounce along the desk I had placed the lights and bags on. A huge gust of wind rattled the window, scared me half to death. It had been quiet, windless night just a minute before. I looked around to see if anything had been knocked over, and I saw the Christmas lights curling slowly around the plastic bag. I was transfixed. There was nothing pulling either end of the light strand, no object placed on or near them that would drag them around by force of gravity. There was nothing natural about the way it caused an air bubble in the bag to form and rise as it twisted faster. The bubble resembled a head, and the lights looked like it was strangling its throat. The dread I'd been denying washed over me. I knew it was a threat. I ran out of the dorm so fast that I only managed to bring my laptop and a change of clothes. I found out later that a girl had overdosed in the room next to mine in the first dorm I was in, and the natives never stayed long in the last. Scary things would happen to them, and each and every one of them would bolt. I also found out that my college town had a long and horrible history of natives being murdered and massacred, with the most recent murder taking place in the 1980s. I decided to transfer out of that hellhole. Thank goodness I did. I know of a few natives who stayed in that town for long. Creepy things followed them everywhere, till they were forced to run for the hills. Story number 6. I was 18 and it was my first time traveling alone. I went to Argentina for 3 months, my first weekend, and I'm wandering around Buenos Aires. At the time I knew enough Spanish to get by, and a man approaches me and asks for directions in Spanish. I tell him that I'm not from here. He then asks me if I'm a tourist. I say yes, and he seems delighted, quickly telling me that he is too. He offers up the idea to explore the city together. I, alone in the big city, agree. We start walking together, and he seems like a really nice guy. After about an hour, he says, "Tango hombre? I'm hungry. I hadn't eaten since breakfast, and it's about 1, so we go to a nice restaurant. He tells me I have to try the steaks and red wine. I'm not much a fan of wine, but he convinces me. We're there about an hour and the bill comes. It's 140 pesos. He pulls out 100 pesos. I try to pay for my half, but he only lets me pay with 40 pesos. He tells me I can get the beers later. We continue on our little adventure and eventually come to a bar with outdoor seating. The waitress brings out a liter of beer and we relax. Soon enough, another liter comes out. We finish the second liter and leave the bar. Then I wake up 8 hours later, missing my debit card, iPod, cell phone, and travel guide. Story number 7. A girl I used to know told me a story that her ex-husband used to wake up in the middle of the night because someone was tickling his feet. She told him her dad used to tickle her and her sister's feet to wake them up for school in the morning. So when weird things started happening around the house, they would just say, "Knock it off, Dad," and it would stop. Well, one day something happened in the kitchen, and she said, "Knock it off, Dad," and as she was walking out the door, something growled in her ear, "I'm not your dad." They moved out a few weeks later. Thank you guys for watching and listening. Please be sure to subscribe for future content. Make sure you leave a like and comment as well. Email your true scary stories to thesinfulsavant@gmail.com. And remember, in this moment of worldly crisis, things will get better. Do not despair in your time of need. Till we meet again, stay sinful.